Okay, so welcome to my session, ADX and the Last Crusade on the quest for the Holy Grail of data retrieval. My name is Frank Geisler, and I'm the CEO of GDS Business Intelligence GmbH. We do Microsoft Data Platform and Azure Consulting, and I'm a Data Platform MVP and a chapter lead of PaaS Regional Group Münsterland. I'm on the board of PaaS Deutschland e.V., and I'm also an author and a speaker. And let's have a look at our agenda. So this is an introductory session to Azure Data Explorer. So first of all, we will clarify what is Azure Data Explorer. Next thing is we will talk a little bit about what makes Azure Data Explorer unique. How could you start with Azure Data Explorer? And I will show you a little bit how we can work with Azure Data Explorer. And what I will show you as well is that it is a very cool tool to ingest data and to split ingested data through a user-defined function. But this is something I will show you a little bit later how this will work. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to just raise your arm and ask. And I probably am able to answer the question. Maybe we will see. OK, so first of all, what is Azure Data Explorer? Azure Data Explorer is a big data analytics platform. And the key point is that the Azure Data Explorer is fully managed. So it is a platform service. You don't have to build anything yourself. You can just readily use it, how it is provided by Microsoft, and can start analyzing data right away. So because it is a big data analytics platform, it was aimed at high performance to very quickly retrieve information from data. And because it's a big data analytics platform, the data that can be analyzed with Azure Data Explorer hasn't have to be in such form like a star scheme or something. You can analyze raw data as it is delivered to you. So, and what it can do as well, it can analyze high volumes of data in nearly real time, because Azure Data Explorer is some of the technology regarding to Custo and everything like this, which is also in Azure Log Analytics. So this is a tool or a technology which is built to analyze high volumes of data in nearly real time. What can be analyzed with Azure Data Explorer? It could be structured data. It could also be semi-structured data, like, for example, JSON files or JSON and unstructured data. It could be analyzed over time series. Usually, if you do some data analytics, there will always be some kind of a time component in it. And this is something you can do with Azure Data Explorer, because most of the time, the data you have has some time component you can analyze. So what you can do with it is you can extract key insights, you can spot patterns or trends in your data, and you can create forecasting models on Azure Data Explorer. And Azure Data Explorer is an end-to-end solution. So as a platform service, everything you need for analyzing data is in there. There is the data ingestion. I will show you how easy you can ingest data into Azure Data Explorer. There is query for sure, because if you have data, you would like to query it, right? You can visualize it. The visualization is not as posh as the visualization in PowerShell, not in PowerShell, in Power BI, sorry. But on the other hand, if you want a quick data visualization just to gain an impression of your data, this can be done with Azure Data Explorer as well. And for sure, there are also functionality for management to manage your data. So what are use cases for Azure Data Explorer? Use cases could be log analytics. So you can analyze data from log analytics. If you have multiple systems that send data to log analytics, you can analyze this. You can analyze time series. You can analyze IoT scenarios. So if you have IoT devices which are sending measurements or something like this, then you can analyze this as well. And you can do general purpose explorative analytics with this. Azure products that can be used with Azure Data Explorer are Azure Monitor Logs, Application Insights. So if you're building your own application and use Application Insights for logging, then this can be used for Azure Data Explorer as a basis for analytics in Azure Data Explorer as well. You can use time series insights for Azure Data Explorer, and you can use, for example, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So when there is much data from Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, then this can be analyzed as well. So when should you use Azure Data Explorer? There is a little decision graph here. I won't read it, but I can give you some hints when to use Azure Data Explorer. You could use it if you want to have interactive analytics, for example, aggregation or correlation or anomaly detection. It is for if your data have a lot of variety, velocity, and volume. Maybe you have diverse schemas. Maybe you ingest massive amount of data in near real time. These are all scenarios where you can use Azure Data Explorer for data organization. As I said, if you would like to analyze raw data, and if you do not want to hassle with building some integration through Azure Data Factory or through SSIS or whatever you will do, or maybe to Databricks, then you can use it easily because data ingestion is very easy in Azure Data Explorer. So another thing you have to think of is query concurrency. So are there multiple users to process the data? And one of the key points is build versus buy, because usually maybe you would build a solution yourself, which just ingests the data and do some analytics and so. And in this case, there is a ready-made solution for you. You can just easily spin up your Azure Data Explorer cluster, create some databases, ingest data, and then you could start. This is a process. It's like done in 5 minutes or something like this. So, but what and you will say, well, there are multiple technologies you can do the exact same thing with, but what does make Azure Data Explorer unique? So first of all, data velocity, variety, and volume. This is the usual big data scheme. But on the other hand, it has a very user-friendly query language. The query language, which is used with Azure Data Explorer, is Custo. Who of you has heard about Custo already? OK, everyone? Perfect. Custo is a query language which has similarities to SQL. And you can even use SQL. I will show you a little bit later. But so if you're used to querying data, then Custo is not too hard to learn because it's rather simple and very user-friendly. You can do advanced analytics. There are many end-to-end to-use wizards. I will show you when we do the data ingestions. There are versatile data visualizations, and you can automatically ingest, process, and export the data. So data velocity, variety, and volume. What you can do with Azure Data Explorer is you can ingest terabytes of data in minutes, batch or streaming. You can query petabytes of data, and the results will be there in milliseconds. It has a high velocity, so it can cope millions of events per second. It has a low latency, and what's important as well is there is a linear scale ingestion of raw data. So there is no funny. So if you ingest a larger number of data, then the time will rise in a linear scale and not exponentially or something like this. And what you can do is you can ingest data in different formats and different structures and use various pipelines for this. User-friendly query language, I already talked about this. This is a Custo query language, and it's simple to understand, highly productive. I will show you the Azure Data Explorer or the ADX Explorer. I will show you a little bit later. And there are simple operators for advanced analytics. So what you can do is you can do time series analytics, and there is a large set of functions like adding, subtracting time series. You can do for sure filtering. You can do regression. You can have a seasonality detection. So if you are, for example, analyzing sales data, and you're selling something which has a seasonal component, like, for example, what could I say? Maybe bathing shorts or something like this. And this is something which will be sold more in the summer than in the winter. And this is something you can detect with the seasonality detection. Okay, it was a very simple example. For this example, maybe you don't need seasonality detection, but I think you think what I'm pointing at. So if there is some seasonality in your data and maybe some seasonality you don't know, then you can use Azure Data Explorer and the advanced analytics in Azure Data Explorer to explore something like seasonality. You can do geospatial analysis. You can do an anomaly detection. So if there are some data sets which are not aligned with all the other data sets in your data set, then you can do anomaly detection. You can do scanning, and you can do forecasting. There are some end-to-end use wizards, like an ingestion wizard. There is the Azure Data Explorer Web UI, and there is the Azure Data Explorer, which is a Windows application you can download and you can use. I will show it a little bit later because my demos are in the Azure Data Explorer. And you have versatile data visualizations. There are some basic data visualization techniques which are in Azure Data Explorer already. This is something I can show you. But on the other hand, there are multiple connectors to all other visualization systems, like, for example, Power BI. So you can use the data within Azure Data Explorer to visualize in Power BI. You can use Grafana, you can use Kibana, you can use Databricks. And if there is something which cannot directly be connected, there are ODBC, JDBC drivers. So if you're, for example, using Tableau or Sisense or Qlik or something like this, then you can use an ODBC driver to connect to the Azure Data Explorer data.
Is there a REST API or something?
Yes, there's a REST API as well.
Yeah, so you could take like .NET.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 90% sure. I think there are also, for example, PowerShell modules which utilize the REST API, right? Okay, so automatic ingest, process, and export data. So what you can do is, and I will show you an example on this. You can build a server-side stored function, and this stored function has a logic in it. How your data will be, for example, split into different tables. And the good thing about this is what you have to do is you have to write this function. You have to write an update policy. And after you've done this, then when you ingest data into your Azure Data Explorer table, it will automatically be split into the other tables. So this is very easy, and it's very quick to write. I will show you in a minute. After you've done this, then you have a continuous ingest, continuous export to Azure Data Lake. So you can really use it like a data pump. So you just get data from somewhere, process it, and put it somewhere else. And the ingest and time mapping transformations are done on server side. So how does the process look like, or the Azure Data Explorer flow? It looks like, first of all, you have to create a database. You can do this, for example, through the Azure portal. Then you can create and manage the data, for example, by creating tables, creating ingestion, and so on. And then you ingest data. Ingesting data can be done from different things, like, for example, from an Azure Blob or an Azure Queue, Event Hub, IoT Hub, Event Grid. And what you can do then is the data will be processed through data management, and when the data has been loaded, then it can be queried through the engine. Okay, first of all, how to create a database. The first thing you have to create is you have to create a cluster. This is very easy. I won't show it live because it can take a little while. So I think there is no point in just looking at spinning wheels or something like this. But this is the first thing you have to do. You have to create your cluster. And after you've created your cluster, you have to create one or more databases. And what you can do there is you can have up to 10,000 databases per cluster. And then if you have a database, you have to create a table. And one database can have up to 10,000 tables. And the tables are stored in data shards, which are also called extents. and data is automatically indexed and partitioned based on the ingestion time, so this leads to very fast queries. So I will show you a demo how to create a cluster in a database. So what we do is we can do, if you would like to start with Azure Data Explorer, you can do this by just pointing to this link, dataexplorer.azure.com/free cluster. Free is always good, right? So let me just go here, and I will just quit PowerPoint so we can see. Okay, and I will mirror my screen. There we go. Perfect. So when you go on the, it just ran back. So now, there we go. Perfect. So if you click on the link, you will be here, and you can create your free cluster, which I already done. And what you can do then is you can use one of these three functionalities, like creating database, querying data, or ingesting data. And because we would like to start, I would like to start to create a database. It's very easy. It's on this end, I only have one cluster, so this cluster is offered here, and I have to put in a database name like SQL bits, and this is all. Now it's creating my database on my cluster. So database was created. Perfect. What I will use for what we will do in one of the next demo is we will ingest some data there. What I will use is, on the one hand, if you would like to query your cluster or query your database, you can use the web interface like this. The other thing is there is the this Custo Explorer you can download freely from Microsoft, and this is a Windows application you can use to communicate with your cluster. And what you can see here is it is a little bit like, for example, SQL Server Management Studio, or a little bit like Azure Data Studio is always the same. Here you see your clusters with your databases. This is your query window. You can put in queries, and there is a little advantage about SQL Server Management Studio. So if you click on Run, and you have your cursor like here, it can detect that this is one block which could be run, and it will only run this block, and you don't have to mark it like in SQL Server Management Studio, right? You can, it's maybe not the best thing you see in this conference, but I think it's at least it's very neat. Okay, pardon? Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so just let's jump back to the slides. Let me see where we've been. We've been here, so I will go here. So what you can do with what you can do with Azure Data Explorer is, for example, you can characterize unfamiliar data with Azure Data Explorer to see what information do you have, how many entries are in a table, what's the range of the entries, what's the type of the data, is the data, for example, time series, is this data set complete, are there gaps, and can the data be grouped, for example. And what I will show you next will be how we can ingest data to our database. So I will just leave my PowerPoint again. Okay, so first of all, what we have to do is I will go to connections, and I will just refresh my cluster, because we created a new database, and there is the database SQL bits. And what we don't have at the moment is we don't have a table. But if we would like to ingest data, we have to ingest it somewhere. So I will create a table. And as you can see here, the create table statement is very similar to the create table statement in T-SQL, right? Because you have create table, then you have the name of the table, then you have the different fields of the table with the data types. Okay, it's a little bit different with the colon, but I think it's if you ever have created a table in your life, it's very easy to understand this. So I am on my cluster and on the right database, so I will give this a run. And now it created a new table for me. And when I just click here, you see there is the table logs row. So for sure, in this table at the moment, there is no data in it. And now, so when I do a logs row count here, then you see 0 data. OK, that's OK. So next thing we have to do is we have to ingest data. And there is some demo data here. This is, it's a little bit lengthy. Oh, come on. And what we do is we ingest some data from some Azure Blob storage. OK, let's do this. So I will return to my cluster or to my web page, and I click on ingest. So I can choose my cluster. In this case, it's my free cluster. I can choose a database. In this case, the right database, SQL bits, has already been selected for me. What I can do now is I can either create a new table and would just insert the new table name, and then the table will be created from the data or from the scheme of data that I'm ingesting. Or I can say, well, I would like to use an existing table. In this case, we have an existing table, and we have our existing table logs raw. So the next thing, now we have defined our destination. Next thing is we have to define our source. The source type, you see there are different source types we can use, like, for example, a file. We can just upload any kind of file we have, like a CSV or a JSON file or whatever. We can use a blob. We can use a blob container. We can use ADSL Gen 2 container. Event hubs I don't have here. And we can use Amazon S3. What I will use is a blob container. And I can choose the ingestion type, either one-time or historical data. We will only do a one-time ingestion. We can select the source by just adding a URL. And here we add our URL that we put in. And you see that there are several files in here. The files are zipped. And what we can do here is we can just use these files to ingest. The next thing what I can see here, it already has selected the compression type for me, which is gzip. I can put in the data format, which is CSV. What I will do is I will just click on keep the current table scheme. So you see now it just gave me some of the demo data here. And what I can do is as well is I will not ignore the first record. OK, so this was it. So next, I can start the ingestion, and now it's just loading the data from my blob storage into my Azure Data Explorer. This takes a little time, so in this time, I think we can just move back to our PowerPoint slides to, this is the slide I was looking for. OK, what do we do by ingestion data, which is just currently running in background? We load data into our database, and there are several ingestion methods. We can use ingestion tools. We can use connectors, so we can even use what I did now is I did it manually, but we can also have connectors for different systems, and these connectors, I will show you on the next page. These connectors can be used to ingest data through other systems into our Azure Data Explorer. There are also some plugins, and what we can have is we can have some managed pipelines. We can do a programmatic ingestion. There is an SDK for this, where you can program your ingestion. And as you've seen, we have direct access to our ingestion and can use the ingestion wizard as well. So data management and ingestion. So if we look at this slide, we see, first of all, there are different SDKs for all systems which are commonly used. For example, .NET, there are SDKs for Python, for Go, for JavaScript, and for Java. Managed pipelines can be used, for example, for Azure for IoT Hub, for Azure Tables, and so on. And the connections and plugins can be used for Kafka, for Spark, for Logstash, or for Microsoft Flow. So you can even ingest data into Azure Data Explorer through Microsoft Flow. And on the other hand, what you could use as well is a tool like, for example, a one-click ingestion through Azure Data Factory or Light Ingest. Okay, so after we ingested our data, now comes the very important part, because now we can query our data. And what we can do is we can query our data through the Custo query language. So the Custo query language is very expressive, intuitive, and highly productive. And what you can even do is you can even Frage?
There is a question.
Yes.
Does Azure Data Explorer support changing columns, especially with the IT, the schema can change over time?
Changing columns?
Yes, sometimes, in the auto tables.
Yes, I think if you can. The question was, can Azure Data Studio replace columns? So I don't know exactly if I get the question right, I must admit. But what you can do in Azure Data Studio, not in Azure Data Studio, in the Azure Data Explorer for sure. What you can do in Azure Data Explorer is you can change the order of the columns. There's an example I can show you. And what you can do as well is you can have calculated columns. And for sure, what you can do is you can select columns, so you can leave columns out. The question was more related to schema changes in sources. Well, yeah, well, that's an interesting question I didn't thought about until now. But on the other hand, I think changing columns or changing column names could be a little bit difficult, because maybe you already have some data in there. So what I would suggest, what you could do would be, when you're using Azure Data Explorer, I would have the same that you would have with other data ingestion technologies as well. I would build some kind of a staging area where there are staging tables which have the same structure than the ingested data, and then process them to wherever I would like to analyze them. And if you do this, then you can have two different schemas, and you can, from these two different schemas, you can push the data to one table with one schema with the columns. So hopefully this will answer the question. If not, just write me a mail or something. You can easily find me in the internet, and then we can discuss this. Yes.
And then that is the schema you have. It's not schema.
Okay. But what you can do, yeah, that's a good question or a good remark. So what you can do is, as you've seen in the, I will just jump out of the PowerPoint again and go back to the, here. Okay. It now has ingested the data, but what I would like to show you is, if we go to ingest data, and first of all, what I can do is I can have a new table, then it will take the schema from the source data, right? And the other thing is, what I can do if I have an existing table, and I won't do this until the end, but what I can do here is I can, first of all, I can select the schema defining file, and the other thing I can do is I can also, let me see, I will just put in the link again, and you can have some mapping here. So you can map as well. This was what I would like to show. Okay, back to PowerPoint. So yeah, what we can do as well is we have different query language operators like aggregation, filtering, time series functions, geospatial functions, joins, and unions. And what we can do is we can do cross-cluster or cross-database queries as well. And what also can be done is parsing of XML or JSON. I will show you in a demo. So if you have JSON in your data or in your ingested data, you can easily grab values from there as well. And for sure, it supports advanced analytics and web application SDK and the REST API as well. And last thing you do is you would visualize your results. So there are Azure Data Explorer dashboards you can use. Or, as I already said, there are multiple connectors to visualization services, like, for example, Power BI, Grafana, Kibana, Databricks, or ODBC, JDBC for other systems like Tableau, CSense, or Qlik or something. OK, so let's go back to the demos. Here, OK, what I'm using is I'm using this Custo Explorer, which is a real neat program to use. And as I already showed, these are my connections. This is my free cluster. And you can easily add connections here as well. So just click on Add Connection. And then on the Azure portal, you get an URL for your cluster. You have to put it in here. And then you are connected. And there is, for sure, there is authentication. But after you authenticated yourself, you're connected to your cluster. OK, so we have our SQL bits and our logs raw table. And I've showed you that there were no records in it. But when and this is from Management Studio. I'm always used to just select, but I don't have to. So if I now select this, you see we have loaded some records. There are nearly 4 million records which are loaded. And what we can do now is we can work with this data. First of all, maybe we would not like to see 4 million records here, but we would like to see 10 arbitrary records. So if you use the operator take, it will just take 10 records. And these records are not ordered or something, but it will just take 10 records. And so we can have a look at our data. Our data is some log data. And what you can see here as well is there are already some functionalities that highlight this line. This is highlighted because in level there is warning. And for example, if there in level would be error, then it would be highlighted red. And you can build such highlighters yourself. What you can do here is you can even use SQL. So what I will do now is I will do a count from a logs raw. This is I just executed this tsql command against my my database in my Azure Data Explorer cluster. What I can do, this is another interesting thing. If you're using Custo, you don't want to write SQL, right? But you really would like to write Custo. But maybe you're not so experienced in writing Custo, so there is explain command. What the explain command does is after the explain command, you just put in a SQL command, and then it will write the Custo for you. So I will do this here. Although Custo is not too hard to write, you see, it wrote the Custo for me. So first of all, we have a where clause where the level is error. It put it here in where level is error. What then? There is a max timestamp, which just gives us the newest timestamp for the error. And what it does as well, it projects. It uses project. With project, you can project one data set to another. It will project it to max timestamp, so we'll get one single value. This is exactly the same we would like to, or we would get from the SQL command. So if I will run the SQL command here, we get this. And well, this was not good prepared, so I will just put this here as well. So, and when I execute this here, then I get the same result. So what you can see here, if you're used to writing SQL, you can use a command explain to just let Azure Data Explorer write Custo for you and to understand or to get used to Custo here. Okay, so. As we've seen, you can use a where command, like here. So what we do here is we just get 10 arbitrary rows where there is the level error, like this. And you see all red because level is error. So what we can do is we can use summarize. Summarize is aggregation function, and what we can do then is we can use a summarize function like count. So in this case, we just get the count of records. We can even use more than one summarize function. For example, in this case, we would like to know the minimum and the maximum timestamp. We can do this as well here. So we get the minimum and the maximum timestamp. And what we can do as well is we can check the schema of every command or every data set we will get back. So in this case, we see, OK, we have two columns, min timestamp, max timestamp. And you see the column order. And you see the data type. And you see the column type here. OK, so next, what we can do is we can have calculated values. I will just go back here and show you the data so you see what we're going after. So if we have a look at the properties, well, the errors don't have any properties. So let me just take this one here. So if we look at the, they don't have any properties as well. OK. If there will be values in the properties, you would see that this would be JSON. And what we do in our calculated columns here, we can extend our data set through calculated columns by just putting in extend. And what I will do is I give it a name like original size, and then after original size, after the equation sign, there is the name of the JSON object, which in this case is property, and of the JSON value, which is original size. And there is another one where which is compressed size, and I do it all the same. So what I do here is I will just take 100 records from the component downloaded. I think this was the error. I didn't have downloader in it. And if I just do this, then you will see. Yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. So this is the JSON, and through our extension and through our calculated field, we just pulled out some values from the JSON, like the original size and the compressed size, and you can see it far on the left, on the right. I mean, far on the right, you can see the original size and the compressed size, which were taken out of this JSON. But on this case, thing, I will show you something else. If we just use get schema, we will see the properties field is dynamic field. So the data type is dynamic. And when we pull out values from there, they will be dynamic as well. So you will see this here. So the properties has column type dynamic, original size has dynamic, and compressed size has dynamic as well. So in Custo, there are also some conversion functions, for example, too long. And with too long, I will just convert my values into a long value. And I will do this. Pardon? Screen went away. OK, that's too bad. For some reason, I have a screen. OK. Just. There it is. Perfect. OK, thank you very much. OK, so what I can do is I can use too long, for example, to just convert it to a long value. And if I do so and get the schema row as well, you will see that now we just converted our value to long. So what we can do, we were already talking a little bit about this project, command project. What you can do here is you can, for example, pick certain columns of the data set. In this case, I only will show timestamp. I will show client request ID, level, and message. And by doing this is the same you do if you in a select you put in the columns you would like to show. And what you can do as well is you can filter, for example, on a certain time span. And if you do this, you can use between. And what I do there as well is, because I'm putting in the time span as a literal here, what I'm doing is I just convert it to a date time to have these to use this between. And when we just execute this here, you see that we only have time spans between the dates we just inserted here. What we can do as well is we can have commands like top 10 or something like this, and we can define by which value the top 10 should be evaluated. And in this case, I would evaluate it to top 10 by row count. So we will see the records with the most row counts, and I will just execute this one here, and you can see these are the row counts or these are the top 10 row counts here. And what we can do as well is we can do it. We can rename files. Not rename files. Sorry. We can rename fields. So this is done by project rename, and we can in this case we use project rename file format will be properties format, and the other one what we do here is a reorder. So what we can do is we can reorder the columns in our data set to have timestamp, file format, and row count in the front of our data set. So you can see like this, we just have timestamp, file format, and row count in the front. So let's see, we have some components from our system, like the ingester executor or whatever. These are components from the system which gave us these logs. And maybe we're interested in how many log entries are there by component. What we can do is we can do a logs raw from our table, summarize count, and summarize the count by component. If we do this is like a group by. If we do this, we see this, that we have so many log entries from the ingester executor, from the runner one, and so on. What we can do is we can also have a filtering where message only contains a certain string through the word contains, and this will just give us everything back which contains ingestion, and we will summarize it then by the level. So if there are so many informational messages and so many error messages here. And what we can even do is we can render a little pie chart from our data. So I know this is not Power BI, but at least you can easily just visualize your data to just see how the data in this case is distributed. Okay. So what we can do as well is we can have buckets. So what we do here is we do a count on our data, and we do it in buckets which are 30 minutes long, and render this to a time chart. So we will see that the data set we have will look like this, right? Okay. So, but there was another thing I promised you. The other thing I promised you is I would like to show you how to create a user-defined function and how to use this user-defined function to automatically ingest data to another table. So what we will do here is following. We create a function, and this function, first of all, we can insert a description string. Okay, it's maybe not the best description you have ever read, but I think you know how to use this. And what you can do as well is you can organize functions into folders. So if you have several functions for several things, you can put them in different folders, so you organize all your functions. What I do here in this function is I'm just filtering the logs raw data, which are in our table logs raw, into different through different components. So we are only interested in the ingester components and in the downloader. Okay, and this is easily easily be done by just create the function. Then we give the function a name. We can even use parameters, which I didn't do here, and then in the in this, and here, this is the function. This would be the custo query you would usually use here. So I will just create the function. Function was created. And what I can do here is I can just call the function. This won't succeed because the data which will be given back from the function is too much data for this. So we get this error message. This is OK. But I just wanted to show you that the function is working. So next thing we can do now is, what we would like to do is we would like to have a table. And in this table, there are all the data from this function. 5 minutes, thank you. So what we can do is I will just create a table. And the next thing I will do is I will just alter the table and give it a policy update. And the policy update will be the update from the function will be the policy or the update policy for this. Okay, done this. And now when I look in our ingestion logs, which was the table, you see there is nothing in it. But if now new data would be ingested in our raw data table, then the data will be automatically ingested in our ingestion log table. I can simulate this just by using this here, by just set or append sync on our table logs raw. This does the same like ingesting new data. And what I can see here is this is running at the moment. So we can see here, okay, it is not running. Well, I did an error because I did not replace this GUID here. Okay, you can see that if we execute it the right way, then you would see that this was running. It was running like for 30 seconds or something like this. But what we can see now is that if we just get on our ingestion logs table, it's not ready. Okay. Takes a little while. Come on. Okay, in the background, it's just running. But when we execute this ingestion log take 100 and the data ingestion has finished, then we will see some data sets. And after doing this, every time we ingest data to our raw data table, the data will automatically split through this function, and all the data that are in our selected data, so all data which has something like this in the field component, will automatically be put in the table. So this, as you've seen, this is very easy to build an ingestion or to split data into other tables, and then you can analyze them there. There, it's finished. And you see now we only have data in here with the components I've selected in the user-defined function. And this is easy to really easily just to process your data and to put your data into, for example, another table. And what you could do for sure, this was a simple filtering, right? But what you can do also, you could do for example, some calculation or something, which is a little bit more complicated. Okay, so are there any questions? Gabi?
There's one question.
Yeah.
In the chat. What are the main competitors of Azure Data Explorer?
Oh, that's a good question. As being a Microsoft guy, I don't. Sorry. Yeah, always the same error. The question was, what are the main competitors of Azure Data Explorer? And this is something I really cannot answer because I was only looking into Azure Data Explorer and not to competitors. So, sorry for that. Yes.
Just to be sure, this is write only, isn't it? I mean, you can't go in and delete particular records.
Okay. The question was, is it write only? Yes, it is. So it is not like a database. It is like a data analytics platform for big data. So you just put in your data and you cannot alter it afterwards. So what you can do is you can, for sure, you can process it and for example, filter something. But it's not like a usual database where you can just. Yeah, well, the question was you. Okay, yeah. The question was if I can just create a new table and then insert something in the new table. No. In this case, the flow is that you ingest data to this raw table, and then it will be ingested to other tables and then filtered and whatever and processed. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes. What about the cost? Yeah, well, this is a very good question. So at the moment, this is also a question I cannot really answer because I've just played around a little bit with the free component. But I think if you want to have a look at the cost, then there is the Azure cost calculator, and then maybe you can find the cost there. Yeah.
There's a rule of thumb. I mean,
yeah.
You create clusters.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything where you create a cluster is always cheap, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so, well, I see time's up, so thank you very much, and have a nice conference. And don't forget to evaluate the session. Thank you.